Let's just open up in prayer. Thank you, Father, for this opportunity to discuss your word and to come together as like-minded people, to think about your word and meditate on your word, and for you to speak into our hearts and help us to prepare and also to get ourselves ready as your household and for your coming. I ask you all in the mighty name of Yeshua Mashiach. Amen. All right, so we are in Parashah, Taldot. Now I've colored in the two center letters just to get your attention on the symmetry of this word. You can see a tav on either end, then one in each side, so letter vav, and then the middle is lamed dalet. Now, any word that you analyze in Hebrew, what's on the right is spiritual, what's on the left is physical. What's in the center is what it's all about. Put the emphasis on there, and the outsides, or the left and right, supports what's in the center. So we're going to look at the center word and just see the purpose of the concept of generations and what that means. But before we go into that, I've got a bit of a rambling on just putting us into context of looking at generations. It's easy to just, jump through the book of Genesis quickly. You don't really connect the big dots to see why certain things had to be created. And the thing that's being created here is called the birthright. With Abraham, or last week's concept, what was created was the concept of a household. Prior to that, what was created was the concept of a covenant. Prior to that, what was created was the idea of the fall of man and the consequences of man, which resulted into opposing spiritual entities manifesting in this world, influencing man or infiltrating man, becoming enemies. They're enemies or opposing forces against Yahweh's kingdom, and now they are within his people. And in this context, we're going to look at external enemies. Now, external enemies are normally as a result of mistakes you made. Abraham made a mistake. Sarah made a mistake. Ishmael was the consequence. Down the line, Ishmael's generations became an enemy of Israel. Then Abraham had 6 sons with Ketubah. There are also other nations that eventually become opposing nations against Israel. And we are going to focus on Israel, the household, in the context of the nations, which is more a broader view of a house in a larger perspective. So this Torah portion, if you look back, it started with one man, Abraham, and he had a family. Isaac had children, offspring, and then through that, Jacob. And each time the household just get larger and larger. And through Jacob, the nation was born. So the multiplication concept now come into play. And the covenant, that's the starting point that started with one man, is now being extended to a family, and now it's going to be extended to a nation, and then it's going to be extended to nations. And that's where people miss the point, where they talk about the old covenant and the new covenant. They think the new covenant replaced the old covenant because the new covenant is for the nations. But the new covenant is new to people. It's the same covenant. It's not a new covenant. It's a new audience that are now involved with the covenant, and they are allowed to enter the household. The covenant can only exist within the concept of a household, and you have to enter the household to access the covenant. You cannot get the covenant just by, I'm going to access the covenant now. Been handed to be my whoever. No, you have to enter the household. If you enter the household, there's a gate. There's a door. You can only enter the household through a certain door. And a door always have someone standing at the door, like the garden, 2 angels guarding the doorway. The household has got someone guarding the doorway. And in this context, we see Taldot, we see the Dalet, which give access to the inner parts of the generations which lead to the larger household, which is Mashiach. He's the one guarding the doorway. He's the one who will stop you from entering in to the inner chamber, into the marriage feast. And you'll be crying on the outside if you are not part of the bride. So there is a guardian of every single doorway. It's not free for all. You can't just enter in. And the covenant is not something cheap that they dropped out of a helicopter and you can pick something up of the covenant if you want. You have to enter a place in order to access that covenant. So this basically laid a foundation of extending the covenant promises to multiple people and use the vehicle or the method of the household. And the context of the covenant within the household is called the birthright. So the birthright equals the covenant in the context of a household. And it's only the household that can protect it, that can guard it, and that can allow other people into the household so they can access what is sacred and holy. It's not something that you just publish to everyone on the outside. That's a cheap way of doing it. It's like advertising it and brainwashing people to want to have it. People normally don't want the covenant, but if they know what the covenant is about, then they will kill for it. That's how precious it is. So that's just a bit of foundation on what the importance of generations is. It's the vehicle to allow multiple people to have access to the household, to have access to the covenant. Now, within this context, I'm just going to jump ahead, but just to place everything into perspective. The promise that was given to Abraham was, look up, look at the stars, look at the sea, look at the sand. You can't count the stars, you can't count the sand. Those are 2 opposites and 2 types of people that will access the covenant. The one is the ones that are from the higher or the more holy realm, which is Shamayim, which are the people that's been elevated, or the people who are chosen, or the elevated ones. In the terms of Leviticus, they're called the priesthood. And then you get the people of the sand. They're the normal people. Joe Blow and his friend and his neighbor and all that. They can also enter the household, but they've got a different function. They're of the sand. But both are allowed into the household. We're also going to look at the letter Vav, and within the letter Vav, there's also the concept, what I just described here, even within the letter Vav. So it's interesting to see or to overlay the Hebrew letters with the Parashahs, and they complement one another. And that's not even something that I thought, oh, that's fantastic. I expected that because Yahweh works like that. It's his fingerprints all over it, even his language. All right, so that's just a bit of a backdrop. And I've got 2 slides to recap. But the 2 slides that I want to recap is just the 2 daughters. I'm going to call them daughters because I'm going to look at the concept of Rebecca, where the concept of the house was created. And Sarah is the anointed individual inside the house, and Rebecca is the collective. That also includes those who are anointed working inside the house, which is the concept of the priesthood, and those who are on the outside, who now have the benefit of the priesthood facilitating worship to them. So you've got those 2 peoples within the house, or within a family member. It's normally the father, he's the priest of the house, and then he's got his family and his children and the slaves and everyone working there. They're just the people within the household. But only one has got the authority and the accountability and the resources to facilitate everything that's needed to safeguard, look after, and preserve this household or family unit. And Yahweh gave something very precious to Abraham, and the birthright is the means to pass this on from one generation to another, and to grow this household larger and larger, to extend, to fulfill the promise that was given to Abraham, so that all the families of the earth can be blessed. That's the intent of the covenant. All right, so that's Sarah and Rebecca. I'll just leave them in here for people who want to go through the notes again. All right, placing things into context regarding the book of Genesis, explaining Isaac and Ishmael, and you can see the symmetry through the chapters within the book of Genesis. Now, the chapter we're going to look at is Taldot, which is 7.2 and 7.1. Basically, the center is the core of the symmetry in the Menorah pattern within the chapters that explain the whole story from Isaac up to Jacob and Esau and where they separated. So the focus point is generations. That's the heart and the core of everything, and everything that sits around it support that. But what you can see in the symmetry, on the edges you get separation, then you get unification. Now just those two things is part of a creation process. We looked at that. You can also explain it as life and death. Also explain it as a cycle. So we see the same concept of cycles within the generations and the people, and how they interact. And then you get the idea of the covenant and the altar. It's also in symmetry. And then you get the land and the water, the two things you need to look after you in a physical way, which is one of the ingredients of the promise or the blessing that Jacob received. We're going to look at that in detail. So the land and the water is very prominent there. And then you get the idea of the bride, which is a more mature level of the family unit, where the multiplication function can start to happen. And that's what generations is all about. It's about taking something that is good, let's replicate that, so we can multiply it and spread it around the whole world, so everyone will have a benefit of accessing that concept called a household. All right, let's get into it. Taldot. Tav, Vav, Lamed, Dalet, Vav, Tav. Sounds nice if you say it. You can make a rap song of it. It means generations and descent, or also descendants. The Lamed Dalet, or the Dalet Lamed, actually, if you read from left to right, right to left, is surrounded on either side by a Vav Tav and a Tav Vav, which make it a mirror image. Now, within the context of this Torah portion, there are twins that are going to be born, and they are going to be two nations. And we can see the twins in the name Taldot, the two Vavs, or the two boys. And they sit on opposite sides. One is on the right, which is spiritual. One is on the left, which is physical. We get the two Tavs. Now, the Tav means yoke. Each one of them has a yoke to bear, a part to play within this idea of the generations. And everyone playing their part will make sure that the outcome, which is the Lamed Dalet, which is the word load, will come into its fullness. And load means travail, which is labor pain. So it's to do with new life and birth, contention and strife. Now, if you just look at that, it's got a positive and a negative connotation to it. Contention and strife is something that happened between the two brothers, and their birth was the new life that brought forth this new generation of opposites. Now we get that same idea with the tree of knowledge, the tree of opposites. So we see the same idea. So something that bears fruit. You have fruit that is good, fruit that is evil. So you can immediately link the fruit that's evil to Esau and the fruit that's good to Jacob. But even though Jacob wasn't goody two-shoes, he had his faults. but his heart was in the right place, and he was in the process of being refined, and he allowed Yahweh to work with him. But Esau, on the other hand, he rejected something very precious, and that caused him to move to the opposite side and eventually be separated. So the concept of the separation come into play. Where else did we see this concept of separation within the household previously? 2 Torah portions back, I think we saw it. Or was it last week as well? We had the Egyptian seed that came into the household through Ishmael's mother. And Ishmael was the seed of Egypt that was mixed into the house or the seed of the Hebrews. Now you have a mixture, and that cannot exist within a household. So Yahweh separated that. And the mistake that Abram and Sarah made had the consequence of strife and contention and separation, because that's the process of purification or creation or restoration. So restoration is always present when people make a mistake, and you have to get rid of the consequence of the mixing that now need to be separated. So the pain that we experience in our lives is because of imperfections and mistakes we made in the past, or previous mistakes, or the fallen nature or the fallen state that we are in. So nothing is perfect. So we all experience contention, strife, and pain in this life because of the imperfection of this fallen state, and our own imperfections and our own mistakes just escalate even more and more. So why does bad things happen to good people? Because good people aren't as good as they appear. We all put a little mask on, we look holy, but back at home, when you look in the mirror, you look into a very imperfect person, and you know all that person's mistakes. And someone that's very close to that person can vouch for that. Yes, that person's not that great, but they're trying. You're trying. So if you see me in my natural state, you might not like me, but I'm trying to be a good person. But sometimes I'm not, because I've got an internal Jacob Esau little needle thingy, and sometimes the gauge is going towards the wrong side when I get things to overwhelm me that are more fleshly, or leaning towards physical things or needs. You forget about the spiritual things. So we try to get the balance slightly more to the right. All right, so load has...
The race that we are running, isn't it?
Hey?
That's the race that we are running.
You run the race against yourself. And Paul explained that beautifully. Old man, new man. That's a Jacob Esau duality within each and every one of us. Gematria of load is 406. That means to lay bait, lure, snare. You get a few other meanings, and then you get calamity, restraint, hindrance. And then to arrive, desert, in the wilderness. Wine press. Desert and wilderness, same thing. And then the wine press. And then you see Lord of Destruction. And the positive meanings are more pleasant. And we see Elohim has made a place of rest. So we start off with an imperfect state, and then we go through a wilderness experience. Now, every person who is alive today, your life is your wilderness. That's your desert experience. And in this life, if you're not like Jacob, who will allow Yahweh to refine you, you'll end up in the next cycle, which is the winepress, which is another wilderness experience. And if things don't work out, most probably there will be another cycle of refinement. So Yahweh keeps on refining, like the goldsmith, to purify Adam, the collective. And the separation is part of this process. And we see that in the environment of a desert situation, which is not a pleasant place for the flesh, but it's a good place for the soul. So future generations, when we look at this, we'll see that they will go through wilderness experience and carrying the yokes of contention. When we look at the future household, which is called the body of Messiah, for example, do you think there's contention within the house of Messiah? Yes. We've got over 40,000 different opinions and opposing opinions, and people will defend it with passion, cause a lot of strife and fighting and separation. I will leave this church and I'll join another one. If you don't like, you start your own until you get members joining, and then you want them to get rid of them because they're not like-minded. So you always have that thing. And generally, you are the biggest problem because you take your baggage with you. The idea is you need to be within a household, regardless how imperfect it is, because it's just a desert environment. You need to look inward and allow Yahweh to purify you in the midst of that. One of my friends, when I was a young Christian, told me that the person that irritates you the most is your greatest blessing. Because he or she will bring out the imperfections in you, and you have to deal with it. If it was a perfect environment, everyone was angels, you probably would have acted like one and never been challenged with the real Esau within you. So it's a good thing to dig deep and get those little impurities surfaced so you can deal with them. So it's not bad if you lose your temper or you do something, as long as it's not a habit or a lifestyle, because we sometimes just fall and make mistakes. But be quick to repent and try to walk in a holy lifestyle and allow Yahweh to purify you. Don't just accept it. I'm imperfect. It's his problem. He needs to save me. I'm not going to do anything. That's the wrong attitude. We need to strive towards perfection and holiness, and for the benefit of others, so you don't lead other people astray by setting the wrong example as well. All right, so within this desert experience, Yahweh will work with you within the body of Messiah, and we all can recall our journey from once you got saved or born again, whatever you want to call it, and your journey that you followed. Every step you took there was a refining process. And when you look back, you can see the benefit of those steps you took. And the wisdom is never to spit in the pool that once gave you water to drink. So don't point fingers at previous denominations that you were part of and telling them they're the Antichrist and they're evil and they're this. No, that was your starting point. It's just the immature level in amongst immature people, which is not a bad place to start when you're a sinner, because sinners feel slightly less confronted in an environment where people are less holier than thou, and they will be able to grow better in that environment. There's less judgment amongst those people. Genesis 25:19, and he says, these also are the generations of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, whom when he was 40 years old, took a wife Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Mesopotamia, the sister of Laban. And Isaac prayed to Yahweh's wife because she was barren, and he heard him and made Rebekah conceive. And Yahweh said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 nations will go their separate ways. From birth, one nation will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. So Rebekah had insight into what is to happen, because when you read the storyline, it seems like Rebekah deceived Isaac, Jacob deceived Isaac. So they're in the wrong, and Yahweh is allowing that. So how righteous is he? Yahweh foreknew what is going to happen. If you just look at Isaac, he was blind. Blindness is symbolic of spiritual blindness. Rebekah had the spiritual sight because she had the word of Yahweh, not Isaac. He was actually the spiritual weak one in relation to Rebekah. The other thing that stood out was Isaac loved the food that Esau gave him. He spent more time with Esau, and Esau was a man of the field, and he loved Esau more than Jacob. And Jacob was a man of the house. He used to work around the house, look after the family. He was the softy, helping his mom out and looking after his grandpa Abraham probably. And he's the one who was more in tune with the family needs, looking after the family, where Esau was always on the road, go hunting. He's never there. He's just out there. It's like in a modern world where the dads are never home. They're always out hunting. So the balance, if the balance is not right, you can see that the household won't be looked after spiritually and have the right spiritual leadership. So the mistake that Esau made, we'll look at that in a moment, was he basically favored the physical side of the firstborn benefit more than the spiritual side. But Jacob automatically did the spiritual side naturally. And that's why he offered to buy the birthright from his brother, because his brother didn't even care. He said, I'm hungry, I'm going to die anyway. I'll sell it to you for food, because his existence was around to be fed and to have the nourishment, physical sustenance, where Jacob knew the spiritual side is more important. Rebekah's father was Bethuel, which means daughter of Elohim, or the word daughter connected to Elohim. And when we looked at Sarah, we saw that the word that's slightly with different vowel points is straight ones connected to Elohim makes the word Yisrael. So we see the same concept here with Rebekah's father, which is daughter connected to Elohim. And the daughter connected to Elohim is a very strange name for a man, isn't it? So now the man in his name is referred to as a female function. And that's a future prophetic picture of the bride or the body. That's a female in relation to Elohim. That's the male function. And daughter of Elohim is actually a future picture of the marriage between the bride and the groom, the male and the female coming together. And we see the connection through Hebrew poetry to Yisrael, which is the bride of Messiah. Now, in our previous study, we looked at Sarah and Rebekah and connect that to the word bath or daughter, give us the idea of two daughters. And within every daughter, which is the word bath, you get a bet and a tough. So every daughter had a yoke to carry, which was their barrenness. That was a major thing for a woman back in the day, not to be able to have offspring or to be having children. So that's the first hurdle they had to overcome. And when they overcame that hurdle, the household came into being. And the household in this concept is the offspring or the generations or the children that will come from that. And we can see that every time with the women of God, they always start off by with being barren. What do you think is that? What is that a picture of? We are referred to as the bride, female, whether you're male or female, you're always spiritually female. You start off by being in the world, by being barren. And once you get into the house, you become fertile through the anointing. Now you can have an offspring. So it's the same symbolism that we see in that.
Is it Isaiah 66 or 69? I'm not sure. Where it says to enlarge your tent.
Isaiah. Oh.
Yeah, is that one?
Enlarge your tent.
Enlarge your tent, because he's going to
increase
you.
Yeah, and to enlarge the tent is to allow more people to come in. And that's the concept of the house. When we looked at the two daughters, which is Sarah and Rebecca, or the function of the daughter, within the word bath, we have two-letter tafs and two-letter bets. The two-letter bets represent, what does that represent? Two houses, or the division within the house, or the idea of smaller houses coming together to make one big house. But when we look into the future, Israel will be divided into two houses. And also, the bride of Messiah will be divided into two houses. Have you ever thought about that? Because there will be the bride and the guests. Both will attend the wedding. The one is higher than the other. One is of the stars, and the other one is from the sand. The one has got high authority, which is the concept of the firstborn. They've got the birthright blessing or the birthright responsibility. And the others are just to follow the ones who's got the birthright responsibility, and they're all part of the household. So one is not better than the other. The one has just got more responsibility and resources, whether it's material or spiritual, through the anointing, in order to facilitate all the functions that need to be in the household to make it a healthy family unit of Yahweh. So that's the idea of the two beds as well, is the two groups of people that exist within the household, the firstborn and the rest of the family. This is the picture of Jacob and Esau. You see the two dogs. That's within each and every one of us. And the one that you feed is the one that will be the strongest, the one that will overcome the other. So you can decide which dog you feed. If you're prone to getting angry, I suffered from, I think I had to go for anger management. I think I was that extreme when I was young. So I had to stop feeding that dog because I was, what do you call it? Very hard to live with person. Yes.
Always angry.
Always angry. And it was driven through my perfection and my drive to be successful in the physical. And that led me to become an Esau. But when I stopped doing that, I focused my energy, most of my energy, towards Yahweh's things. I became a Jacob, which is actually my name. So it's within each and every one of us, and everyone can change, and I'm living evidence of that. Because I was a horrible, horrible person. Even as a believer, I was a horrible person.
No, you weren't horrible.
No, bad. From my point of view, the harshness of looking at myself in my mirror, I did not like that person at all.
You Torah, isn't it?
No.
I've got evidence. I was not a good person. I was not good.
And the only thing that really, really, really changed me was the Torah. Not doctrines, not belonging to a church, not doing stuff in the church.
No, because you still, it's because of the grace and love in church, you tend to still do things, because
Where your focus is, that's who you will become. And Yahweh's got the perfect plan and the image He wants for you, but there's also the shadow of the image which you cast into this physical. And if you lean towards that, you become that.
Well, Torah is the manual for life. I think if you, we said many times, people like to say that they have to go for, what do you call it? What's the freedom?
Deliverance.
Deliverance. And I could not understand that. And I said, well, why do you need to be delivered if you've got Jesus or Yeshua inside it of you? How is it possible that there can still be something bad? And then when we discovered Torah, I said to Philip, that is the answer. Torah is the answer. If you follow Torah, your life becomes straight. Before that, you can go for deliverance as many times as you want. If you don't make the decision to follow Yahweh's word, you're still going to struggle with the same problems somewhere along the line, isn't it?
It's like following the shadow instead of the real thing.
That's right.
That's it. And the shadow is easy to see. You look down, you just see it. If you look up, it's difficult to make up what the image is of the light, because it's bright. So let's test doctrines against the concept of Jacob and Esau. So the doctrine of the 10 steps to physical prosperity, will that stimulate Jacob or Esau? Who's the one who will follow that doctrine? It'll definitely be the man of the field, Esau. So every doctrine that's out there, you can test and see which one it will feed and who you will become if you follow that doctrine. It's packaged in a beautiful spiritual way with spiritual lingo, but it's feeding the wrong dog. And then you go astray in the church. And that's the danger of false doctrines, where they take something, they put the emphasis on the wrong word, where he says, he will give you all the desires of your heart. What does it mean? Okay, I can dream up everything and he will give it to me. No, he will place his desires in my heart and I will follow his desires for my life. I will follow him, not my own desires. That's a real interpretation.
And I think also, if you take doctrine is like cake dwellers, they just keep moving along. But you've got to be a man in a house, established in a house. You've got to have that word that's built in you to complete the birthright in that house. And if you keep dwelling, if you keep moving from place to place like that, and that's what doctrine does. It moves you from this to that to that. You never get to the truth. You're always following a lie or a part of a truth.
And your thirst will never be quenched because your thirst is spiritual and they feed you the wrong water. Yeah. Right, it said the children struggled in a womb. That's an interesting concept. So before they were born, there was conflict. That shows you that the souls existed within the bodies of the babies within the womb. So those who say that at the moment that they are born, then the soul enters the baby, you can abort them prior to that because the soul is not in there, it's not a human. This is scriptural proof that it's a lie.
Now it's been pushed past birth now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
My goodness.
By the age of
I don't know.
60.
Yeah.
So you can kill everyone.
70.
70.
No, I
Big
actually
age.
read an article saying that a baby still doesn't have a conscience when it's first born.
So what age do you get a conscience?
I don't know.
6,
I think
7,
at the
8.
moment where they do after birth, murder, there's a certain number of hours that they give it.
Really?
That they say so many hours after that's okay. Yeah.
Wow.
All right, the word struggled is the word ratzatz. It means to struggle, to crush, to crack into pieces, to break, to oppress.
But what they were struggling over in the womb, were they trying to get more space, or what is that?
You are crossing my line.
I think Esau had the umbilical cord around Jacob's neck, strangling him.
They could have been. It could mean that they're struggling for the position to be born first.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
Yeah, not only
There's
that,
a lot of room in there.
Because
There's only one.
with
Yeah.
yeah.
Only one can come out at a time.
and you also hear about twins in the womb that the one is consuming the other.
Yes.
When they're born, the one is
Well, they usually have
totally
this
consumed
before they are
in a way.
human life that they do. Yeah.
Never heard of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also they hold hands.
Yeah,
They, they interact with each other in other ways than you see on ultrasound.
Yeah.
So they're conscious.
Did you
Yes.
see there's a beautiful photo of premature birth, twins, and one of the twins was doing well physically, the other was struggling, and they were in separate incubators, and then one nurse,
Clever girl.
revelation, decided to put the healthy twin next to the sickly twin, and as soon as she did that,
She put her arm
put his
around
arm, the healthy one put his arm around the sickly one, and the sickly one recovered.
Yes.
It was like, oh, there's a photo. So check it out.
Okay, even with family members, when you're sick and your family members come and visit you,
You feel better.
you will heal. But if there's a separation, those people die because they don't have their loved ones with them.
Not always, but yeah.
Yeah, but
You're
you've got
better
a,
when
if you're very
when
sick,
you've got family with
yeah,
you.
you've got a better chance to survive if there's people visiting you than not. All right, so to crack into pieces. Have you heard that concept before? Broken vessel. I gave you a hint there. And the result of a broken vessel is a double tzaddik, which is in the word ratats, which is resh tzaddik tzaddik. So it's double righteousness can only come through total brokenness.
Ishmael, right?
Yeah. And what they struggled for is righteousness in the womb. Each had enough righteousness, but the one that want to have everything, and there's contention. So do you see that in the body of Messiah? There's fight or struggles amongst believers because I want to be more righteous than you, because then I'll feel better about myself. The holier than thou concept,
I've got more blessings.
the competition, spiritual bragging or whatever, or knowing more verses and rambling them off, to impress people. You don't impress no one if you do that. Yeah, so the main thing that stands out here is double righteousness can only come through brokenness. And it's Yahweh that breaks you through that desert experience in order to separate everything that's not part of you and then put you back together again. And it's similar to a surgeon who need to cut you open to remove the cancer or whatever that's about to kill you or in the process of killing you, and remove that. And so you can become whole again. So the separation and the brokenness is a painful experience, but if you want to be righteous, you will go through a process of being broken now. So every one of us get a few slaps in life, and you feel like, Yahweh, where are you? What's happening? You're not looking after me, that kind of thing. That desperateness. But that's the lowest point where he's doing his greatest work, to instill double righteousness within you. All right, so Ratat has the gematria of 380. We looked at this one before. We've got breach, which is a breech baby that causes suffering at birth. Also have slander, Egypt, bondage, archive, which is the enemy, the crush, to oppress. So we see the same mechanisms of crushing you is through external enemies, through also bondage. And for the mere fact that you are born in this realm, this fallen state, it's a state of bondage. We are born into this. And then Yahweh wants to separate you from this, but you'll experience a time of darkness and a brokenness and feel desolate and devastated. But there's a crossroad that will come your way in the midst of that time. So let's think about it. You are now forced at the crossroad to choose this way or to choose the thing that you are forced to do. What will you choose? Are you going to choose the easy way that's got severe consequences, or are you going to choose the right way that will also have consequences, but the outcome will be better. But on the fleshly side of things, it will be worse. Where the other one, the fleshly side of things will be initially better, but the long term will be worst. And that's the crossroads every single person in this world today are coming to. What is your decision? Will you be broken for Yahweh, or will you be broken to go the easy way? And Yahweh said, we need to be strong. When the battle of Abimelech, you need your arms uplifted and not drop down your arms. Don't drop down your standard. Stand strong against these things, because you will overcome. And Yahweh is in the midst where things look the worst. He's the closest. And that's where your double righteousness will be earned, by standing strong. You don't have to do anything other than not to budge. That's easy. It's not an extra action you have to do. It's just not doing the wrong thing. And not doing something is easier than actively doing something. I always say that negative commandments are easier to do because it's passive. Don't steal, don't kill. Yeah, it's an effort to bash someone's head in. It's an effort to go out, climb through a window, and steal stuff. It's easier to sit on the couch and not steal and not kill. But to do good to your neighbor is an effort. It's harder to do positive commandments. So what Yahweh expects of us at the crossroad is the same as a negative commandment. Just be passive, stand strong, and don't do the wrong thing, which is easy to do if you know the outcome, if you keep your eyes on Him. All right. The covenant, the birthright, and the double portion. So just within the culture, the firstborn normally receives the birthright, which is called the double portion. Double portion is normally when the father dies, the firstborn will get double of everything. And the reason for getting more physical resources, if you like, is because he now has the role of the father in the household, and he needs to financially look after the house. So it makes sense to give that person more money or more cattle or more whatever to look after the household. It's not to squander. It's a responsibility. So it's not necessarily a great thing. It's a task that you have to do, and you are now accountable. If you look at that in the context of Esau and Jacob, Esau wanted the double portion, the physical goods or wealth, but he was not interested in the spiritual side or the spiritual responsibility. And Jacob was happy to take that up. And I don't even think he thought about the physical benefits of being the firstborn. He was just interested in the spiritual benefits of being the firstborn. And that's why Yahweh chose him and did not choose Esau. And the situation led itself to play out.
But do you also see in that prior to their birth, and they struggled in the womb, what's name was sought by Sarah, said 2 nations are inside your womb. The one will serve the other. The older will serve the younger. So Rebecca was sitting with a problem now. She had this promise, and she had this thing. The one son is what we call a real go-getter, just go and do his thing, and the other one sitting at home is more responsible. The birthright rightly should be the younger one, because he's more responsible in the home. So this drove her to choose the more spiritual, the more settled son. So she, in fact, took it in her power to change situations when she went through the whole thing of the skin on the arm and, leave it with me. I'll get it right. I'll get it. In other words, she was taking Yahweh, what Yahweh was going to do. She was trying to force something on it.
She was rowing that boat.
Yes, she was driven to giving this one child the birthright. And she actually took from Yahweh's responsibility. How much greater would that blessing have been, like with Abraham and Isaac? If she had just left things, there would have been probably a huger blessing or a miracle that would have taken place later on. You know, that there was a swapping of this birthright. But she forced it upon herself. So straight away, she went into lying, she went into deception, she went into all sorts of things, which was actually a negative. Really, when you come to think of that, a real negative. And the outcome was hardships down the line. It was terrible hardships. Murder was brought into being. I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
If our dad dies, I'm going to kill you. You know, there was all those negatives that followed a bad decision. Instead of leaving Yahweh to do it.
Yeah. It's the same as Sarah and Abraham.
Yeah.
They got a promise, not I'll do it my way.
Yes,
Rebecca had the promise, and she did it her way.
exactly.
So there was actually a better way. She just had to be patient and not do the wrong thing. So she was at a crossroad as well. And yeah.
I don't know, you can imagine. It's a pretty powerful word that she got from Yahweh to say that there are two nations and this is what is going to happen. Surely she shared that with her husband.
Yeah.
Surely Isaac knew about that, and yet he's choosing.
So he made the wrong choice.
He's making the wrong choice.
Maybe she did it to save Esau's life.
Exactly.
Because maybe if Yahweh needs to take care of it, Esau might not live.
Exactly. That's why I said the miracle would have been a bigger one.
Yeah. Or more severe
Yeah.
consequences for Esau.
It's interesting how he's able to take all those human failings and it still comes out the right way.
Yeah.
There's a pattern there as well from right from the very beginning. You know, Eve was tempted, Adam made the wrong choice.
Yes.
Sarah made the decision, Abraham made the wrong choice. Rebecca
At the inside, made the wrong choice. Yeah.
You know, because when you look at later on, it says there was scripture says Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. Now, it's not that God hated him. God hated, you know, when he was born red and hairy. Red represents the earth.
Yeah.
The earth was cursed. So God was saying, I hate the curse. Not him, but I hate the curse.
Yeah.
Because he represented the curse. It's so deep.
But the word hate also has got a subtle meaning that means not to choose.
Yes.
And
Choose.
yeah. So when Yeshua said you need to hate your mother and whatever and follow me, it actually means not to choose them but choose me. It's in that context. It's not a question of I hate you and I love that one. It's just the Hebrew way of saying you choose this higher, regard this higher than that.
But the other element of this, though, is that God allows all this to happen because in the process, the weakness of each person is brought to the fore, and they have to deal with it. Like Jacob has to enslave himself to Laban for years.
That's right.
Esau has to deal with his desire to kill his own brother. He would have wrestled with that for years probably. And Rebecca lost her favourite son.
Yeah, there was separation that happened.
Separation.
She had to flee.
She had to pay the price for what she did.
She lost her
No
son.
one escaped.
She lost her favorite son.
Yeah.
As a consequence of what she chose.
So who actually carried out the physical side of the birthright? Of taking over the household when Isaac died? And
Esau did it.
no, he went up too, didn't he?
No, I think Esau probably did.
So he
Yeah.
got that part. And
Yeah, he kept the animals and all that, and Jacob just did a runner and just took half the blessing. Off he went. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, so the physical side and spiritual side, if we look at that from a perspective of Israel, the birthright, the Levites received the spiritual side of the birthright blessing. And I think it was Judah received the physical side of the blessing. And Benjamin also received part of the physical side of the blessing because his land is the location where the temple was built. So there's certain attributes within, or benefits within the tribes themselves, that shared the physical benefits of the birthright, but the Levites received the spiritual responsibility of the birthright. And when Israel went up to Sinai, Yahweh called them a kingdom of priests. So the spiritual side of the birthright is basically to be the priest of the house. And the nation of Israel are now called to be priesthood amongst the nations. And they rejected that. And then when Messiah came, those who are now anointed by Messiah, they are called the kingdom of priests within Israel amongst the nations. And now the nations can come in and they facilitate the process of letting them enter into the household. That's why the Christians, with the anointing of Mashiach, do missionary work amongst the nations. And Judah, our Jewish brothers, they don't. They just guard the Torah. They guard more the physical side of the birthright. Right, there's the famous words from Esau. I'm about to die. What good is my inheritance to me? And Jacob said, so Esau swore an oath to him and sold him his rights as firstborn. Then Jacob gave Esau a meal of bread and lentils. He ate and drank, and then he got up and left. This is how Esau showed his contempt for his rights as firstborn. So he basically despised it or saw it as something lesser than food. Now, if you compare spiritual and physical food, how do we regard physical food versus spiritual food? And how much physical food do we eat in relation to spiritual food? That's the question. And a lot of people don't eat any spiritual food, only physical food. There are people in the world. When you get believers, they only go once a week to hear a little message. They only got a little snack. So they're anorexic Christians. If you put their armor on, it will fall off them because they're very skinny. If they lift their arms, they will fall through their own little thingy. That's how underfed they are.
But they're also probably obese as well. So you've got this contradictory in the physical.
Yeah, physically they're wealthy and they prosperous and all that. But spiritually they anorexic, sick and skinny.
Also, whenever I read this about the lentils stew, it makes me think that because it says he was a man of the field, he loved game, loved meat, feed the man meat. So it makes it, in my mind, that he despised it even greater because he sold it for like a bag of chips.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Because
Yeah.
lentils was one meat, it's not.
No, a vegetarian meal.
Yeah.
It's a man who liked meat every day.
Yeah.
So how desperate was he that day?
Yeah, willing to get that for,
So I think he went out to hunt maybe for a week, a couple of days. He came back with nothing. So he was frustrated because he didn't get anything. He had nothing to eat, nothing to slaughter. or to make food for himself. And there his brother was making his little veggie, gluten-free lentil soup. And he was hungry to the point of death, he thought. Yeah, so the desperate state of the physical desires will compromise even your preferences if you come to a point. So that's the other crossroad. If you've got principles and you're a point of desperation, you'll even give up your principles, your meat. You'll eat a meal that you normally despise. That's how desperate you are. And we are sort of moving in a very desperate situation in this world. And every one of us will despise our preferences and will compromise, take the cheap outcome, the quick and nasty. And Yahweh said, don't do that.
Be strong, be strong.
Yeah, chazak. Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Birthright is the word bekor, kaf resh. It's translated to firstborn. It's made up of a bet, that means house, a kaf, that means hand, and a resh, that means head. I've got the little picture there with the resh, the head, with the kaf on the head, and the bet, that's the house. You can also have a kaf, that's a hand that reaches out from the house towards the outside. The reason I put the kaf on the head is relating to Isaac's name. Last time we saw it was only the yod that was added to laughter. It's like the hand on the head, which is the anointing of the birthright that moved from Abraham to Isaac. In the same way, the hand is now on the head, but this time within the house. The house is now established, so the anointing now happens within the household, from members within, to continue the blessing. Now, what's interesting is that the bet is number 2, kaf is number 20, and resh is 200. Makes number 222. And they are all related to each other through the factor of 10. If you multiply 2 by 10, it's 20. 20 by 10 is 200. So it's like 3 bets, 3-letter bets as well, each with a factor of 10, or elevated state of 10, if you like. And that reminds you of what? What is that a picture of? 3 houses, and the one is more important than the other. Yeah, but they're all one house, but they've 3 compartments within one. That's a tabernacle. The first one, the bet, is the outer court, the 20, which is kaf, you see, holy place. And the resh, 200, it's the Holy of Holies. Now the resh means head or leader. That's the throne of Yahweh. The kaf, the priests went in there. They facilitate worship. They do all the things with the showbread and the wicks. They use their hands to facilitate that. Outer court is just the area, a house, an empty space, a tent, if you like, area where people can just enter. You don't have to do anything. Just take part. And that's the 3 symbols of that. So now we see the direct correlation between the firstborn birthright and the tabernacle and the house of Yahweh, manifested in the physical through the symbolism of the tabernacle that's in heaven. And it's 100% correlated to the firstborn. And that's the point of contention. Where's another point of contention in this world where there is a house of Yahweh that's been destroyed, not once? It's Israel. It's all about the house. It's all about the presence. And that's the spiritual connection from a physical point of view to connect directly with Yahweh. And that's a very powerful place. And that's why they contend for that place. If you put it in modern terms, it's a portal. Connect you directly to the throne of Yahweh. Direct connection. And that's the power of the birthright. That's also why the firstborn is seen as the priest, because they're the ones who facilitate in the middle chamber to connect to the outer chamber, the people, and connect to the inner chamber, which is the rest, which is the king. And they're the mediators. That's a function of Mashiach, a high priest, to intervene between the Father and the people. Or in the concept of birthright. Now, if you shuffle the words a bit, from the word bekor, you get the word berach. That means blessing. And we know that the birthright had the blessing. And it's made up by the same words. And the blessing is all about the house of Yahweh, which contain the presence of Yahweh on this earth, which is the most valuable thing that they had within their household, is the presence of Yahweh. They also had access to the covenant of Yahweh and the covenant promises that's linked to that. And they carried that with them from one generation to another. So that's the most valuable thing that Jacob realized. I need to secure this. I need to protect this. I need to nourish this, because Esau was never here. He's got no clue, and he even doesn't want to learn about it. It's always out there, out there, out there. His dad is supporting him. Yeah, go out, go hunt, I'm hungry. You know, it's not about teaching him. Hey, my son, come and sit. Let me tell you about your father Abraham, the covenant. I think Jacob sat at Abraham's feet while Esau was out hunting all day long, because that's how the information was transferred. Now, within the covenant, what's also given to Abraham that people forget is the culture. He was the first Hebrew. Then Isaac was the second Hebrew. Jacob is the third Hebrew. And Esau rejected his culture. He married other nations. He wanted to be like them. He despised his culture. And your culture, if you don't want to define any culture, a culture always have celebrations, festivals regarding who they are and what they do and what they believe. And your culture normally is contained, your faith is embedded with your culture as well. And within this culture, not only that, it contained the covenant. And this covenant was a very valuable thing that need to be now shared up to the point of every family on the earth need to have access to this. So it was a very high task and responsibility that was given to Abraham, to Isaac, and Isaac rejected that, hence his blindness. Luckily, Rebecca had the revelation, and it was passed on to Jacob. So that's the importance and the seriousness of this.
You know, Philip, too, when you take the two sons, you take Esau, he broke a commandment by not honoring his father and mother, by going out and taking other women from other nations. And his brother, down the line, the other one goes out and he marries outside of the culture as well. Well, dishonoring his father and mother. He didn't take people or take a wife in his own Hebrew, from his own Hebrew roots. He goes out and he goes and marries somebody else. He either goes to an Egyptian, or he goes to a Hittite, or he goes to...
Yeah.
They married outside, and that was against their parents. The word says, honor your father and mother, and they didn't do that. Both of them, on both sides, they neglected their birthright, really.
Yeah, they endangered it with mixing in other cultures. Because the woman normally brings in decorations in the house, symbolism, little idols to decorate it with. And it's normally the family objects that they bring into the house. And that's a danger of allowing that. All right, number 2 is the word shanaim. It sounds similar to the word shamayim, with the difference of the letter mem changing to a letter nun. Now, shamayim means heavens that connect to the stars, and shanaim means number 2. Now, what we know about the promise that was given to Abraham Yahweh said, look up, look at the stars, look down, look at the sand. So there's a dual promise given to him, not only one promise explained in two ways. That's what I always thought. No, it's two promises to two different audiences. The one is for the higher people, the priesthood, the kingdom of priests, the stars. The others are for the nations, all the families that will be blessed. And to come to this conclusion, you look at what is similar within every word, is the yod mem at the end, which is the word yam, which means large body of water, the sea, which is a symbolism of the nations, which is where the sand of the sea is. The nations, which is part of the promise. And those are the outer court people, the sand, and the inner court people, they are the stars. The priesthood and the 12 tribes. Or Israel, the kingdom of priests, and the nations. The same symbolism that Yahweh used. And there's always a concept of a firstborn or leadership that's got the responsibility to look after the culture, the covenant, and the health, the spiritual health of the people. That's their task. Now, when Yahweh separated the waters, that's where Shamahim comes from, the waters below, waters above. The people from the stars, the priesthood, they've got the task to separate waters from waters. They need to separate people that are entrapped within the waters of darkness. In this case, it's the ocean, the nations. And they need to bring them out into the household so they can interact with the people from Shamahim, so they can be introduced into the culture, into Yahweh's ways. Number 10 is the factor and difference between 220 and 200. And the gematria of 10 is proud, to cut through, to divide, to withdraw, be exalted, united, echad. So right there you see the starting point, which is a fallen state. Then there's to break through, to divide, separation. And then there's to withdraw what is good, to elevate that, to unify it. And we see the concept of creation, which is separation and then unification. And the cycle continues. And that's where the cycle between the people of the sand will be separated from the sand, just like Adam was separated from the sand. He had interactions with the Aleph and the blood. He became Adam. He was released under the waters of the deep. Now he has contact with Shamahim people, the stars, the priesthood that facilitate the culture, and now he can become like them within the household and become echad with Yahweh. And that's the process of number 10, which is also a meaning of completion. The completion process is to become echad, one with him. Genesis 27:28. May Elohim give you the dew from the sky, the fatness of the earth, fresh grain and new wine. May nations serve you, may people bow down to you. Be the master of your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. That's the promise that was spoken over Jacob, that Isaac couldn't repeat and speak over Esau. It's already said. Cannot change it. So your word is everlasting and powerful. And that's one thing that we don't realize. We just say stuff, specifically sometimes to your children. Well, you're this, you're that, whatever. And if you are an authority figure of the house and you speak down to your children, you bring a curse upon them. The one thing my dad always said and spoke over me, I don't know why he did it. He always said, Philip can do anything. Give him something, he will learn how to do it and master it. And he will be successful. He always said it. I don't know why. Just kept on when people meet us, whatever, I've got something that I built there, whatever, and they ask what's this, then we'll repeat those words again. And that blessing came upon me, and that's why I can do certain things, because of my Father who spoke it over me. And he had the authority to do so. And Yahweh took him serious. Very powerful to speak good blessings over your children as an authority figure of the house. Right. Where was I? Oh yeah. This blessing consists of two parts. First, a physical side, and then a spiritual side. I made the physical the green. Dew from the sky, fatness of the earth, fresh grain, and new wine. All the others are more spiritual because they can't touch them. So the first one is dew. That's the word tal, tet lamet. Comes from the root word talal. That means shelter with a roof. So what that indirectly is telling us, when you're part of the covenant and covenant people of Yahweh, you will always have a shelter over your head. Don't worry about it. He will look after you. The next one is fatness. It's the word mashman, which is mem shin mem nun. That means richly prepared food. So that means that the covenant people of Yahweh will always have food on their table and something to eat. Not only that, they will also have spiritual food, and we see the hint there with the two mems, which represent the covenant, the tablets, the heading of the commandments, which are the 10 instructions Yahweh spoke from the mountain. So if you follow them, you will never go hungry. Yeah. Next one is fresh grain. That's the word dagan. Dagan comes from the root word daga, that means increase, and that has to do with offspring. So physical as well as spiritual. New wine is the word tirosh. Comes from the root word yarash, that means to take possession of. That means to do with inheritance. In the case of Israel, the promised land, and a place where you can lay your head. Spiritual blessings has to do with within the family unit, that you will be the head of your family, your master of your brothers, the sons of your mother will bow down to you. That means they will respect you and listen to you. And the other one is on the outside of the household, the nations will bow down to you. And if they curse you, a curse will come upon them. And if they bless you, they will be blessed. So do not speak against Israel. Do not speak against the Jews ever. Be careful what you say. Even though they do wrong things, don't speak negative things over them, because they are blessed. And not only that, the anointed ones who come into faith through Yeshua Mashiach or Jesus Christ are also part of the covenant of Abraham. Don't speak negative against the Christians, whether they do wrong, because you bring a curse upon yourself. So that's...
The thing is with both sides, I think more so with the Christians, the Jews actually do have Torah, so they know right from wrong. But with the Christians, most of them are sincerely deceived. They've got good
They're
hearts.
both sincerely deceived. The ones trust their leaders. Their leaders teach them Talmud instead of Torah.
Yeah,
It's on the heads of the leaders. They will get the curse. But don't tell them they're useless or they're going to be replaced or they're evil people or whatever. They're just deceived, in bondage, or immature. And we need to try and reach out to them whatever way we can in order to help them. Don't despise them. They're part of the family. All right.
Well, that was interesting, the blessings, Jew and fatness.
Yeah, because a Jew is the Tal. It's the same as the beginning of the name of the Parashah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got the Jewish pattern. That's right.
Right, now switching gears, looking at the Vav, letter Vav. It's the sixth letter of the alphabet. It means man. When you look at the word Vav, it's two Vavs. Put them on the Menorah pattern for you there. And the word Vav, I've got the next slide, let me jump there. The word Vav means, oh God, okay, I'll tell you in a moment what the word Vav means. That doesn't mean man. The word Vav means hook, peg,
Oh, that's right.
like a tent peg and hook. But in symbolism, because of its number, it's a number of man. Vav represents man. That's why number 6 is man, and Vav is also man. Now, when you look at the Menorah pattern, you have a Vav on the right, a Vav on the left. That's symbolic of Jacob and Esau as well. The one is spiritual and the one is physical. And also the one is called the Neshama, the other one is called the Nefesh. The one is your physical soul. It's got your personality and your physical attributes and all your physical cravings and desires and needs. The other one's spiritual, the enlightened man that connect to Yahweh and these things. The gematria of number 6 is empty talk, be apart, cistern bowl, separation, holiness, and white linen. Very interesting meanings for the number 6. When you look at be apart and empty talk, the concept of be apart in relation to Nefesh, because the Nefesh is also an animal. We are Nefesh, they are Nefesh. The only difference between us and them is we can talk. We've got personalities, they've got personalities. We've got a body, they've got a body. We can talk, they cannot. That makes us more into the image of Yahweh than animals. And the throat area, like we discussed last time, has to do with the tabernacle and the power to speak things from the spiritual into the physical. And that's a great responsibility that's upon man to speak Yahweh's things. And Yahweh said to Adam, he need to name the animals or speak their names. Your name is your character and your destiny. And I think as he spoke, the animals got their attributes, what they have now, today, through the names that he spoke over them. So he co-created the Nefesh realm of animals through the authority and power of speech that was part of Yahweh's image. If you look at the Vav, the two Vavs, it's the number 12. That means lust, desire, greedy, faintness, dismay, failure of mental energy, something lost, speak rashly, speak angrily, terror, pine away, pass away. Then you have riverbank, fish, sign, mark, mountain, to multiply, sheep, one or echad, love fervently, and to be glad. Now, if you just look at that double Vav, or two nails, what does that remind you of? If you translate that into the word nail.
Sorry, ask again.
The two nails, the two Vavs, Vav means nail, in relation to the gematria of 12, that means sign, mark.
Is the crucifixion?
Yeah. Yet the sign of the nails, the mark in his hands of the two Vavs, the two nails that went into his hands, and that resulted in the multiplication of people coming into the kingdom and for them to become a Echad. And he did that because God loved the world fervently and he sent his only son so we can enter into his rest. And he was anointed with joy after he resurrected. So all that language still is applicable within the meaning of this. And he did it for the benefit of the Vav, man, in order to
You know, it's incredible that we see that the gematria of 12, okay, that's the representative of the two boys. And there you've got all what's named why Christ went to the cross. All that on the top there, failure, mental what's named,
Yeah.
all that he suffered for the likes of,
For the lost.
that group there.
Yeah. And they passed away, they pained away through terror and lust, desire, greediness, and faintness, weakness. And the word fish, disciples, fishers of men. Riverbank, John the Baptist, repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. So all those things are the mountain. He preached from the mountain. He will preach again the Torah from the mountain. And sheep, he's the shepherd. Now, he had 12 disciples. Everything makes sense when we look at that. The next thing is the image of man and the image of Yahweh and how we are created in his image through the connection of the Vav. I've got a picture there of a man made up of Yod He Vav He. Yod's the head, the torso is the He, Vav is the spine, which ironically makes you upright or righteous. So that Vav need to stand straight and upright. A crooked back means that Yod He Vav He cannot be resurrected in your presence or stand up, if you like. And then the bottom He is the lower body and the legs. We need to walk in the light. He means light. And we have the top He, which is the lungs, the breath, the ruach. And the Yod is the head, which is a symbol of Yahweh's spirit, which is the unseen hand as well on the head, or the anointing. Now, when you remove the Vav from the word Yod He Vav He, it makes the word Haya, Yod He, He, Yod He. You just shuffle the words to make a word from it. And that means to exist, to arise, and to appear. Now, let's think about the name Yod He Vav He. Your name is your character and your destiny. Do you think Yod He Vav He is the ultimate name that describes the fullness of Yahweh's character, of who he is? Or is he bigger than Yod He Vav He? The Jews believe that every word of the Torah, if you add them together, that's a name of Yahweh, containing all those letters. That's one name. Then if you break it up, they've got multiple ways to chop it up and create multiple names of Yahweh, of which Yod He Vav He is one. If you think of that, about that perspective, for Yahweh, who cannot be explained or described, and the minds of men that are too small to comprehend, even if he attempt to speak a small part, we won't be able to comprehend it. So he gave us a very concise, condensed version of that with a very limited description. So for us, with our limited understanding, looking from a physical into a spiritual, unseen, trying to understand the unlimited, infinite, powerful God, those are the words that he chose to make it as simple as he can to explain himself. It's not all that he is. He's greater than that. In relation to the Vav, Yahweh existed before the idea of man. So when he said, I'm going to create man, he used the letter Vav and created the idea of man within his name that can be perceived from the physical, which is an image of a man, which is Mashiach. So the idea of Mashiach was born at the moment that he decided to create man. And he manifests that in his name, Yod He Vav He, that contained the idea of Mashiach that's within Yod He Vav He, and man that is going to create out of Yod He Vav He. And Vav is the connection. So the Vav exists because of the idea to create something like a man. And in parallel with that, he created the first Adam first, which is Mashiach, and the second Adam, which is the one we know that exists, which is the perfect Adam in the garden, which is the lower Adam. So if you want to know who is Jesus, who is Yeshua, he's a manifestation of an image, which is a portion of Yahweh that's limited in a sense, not in who he is, but limited so we can understand him in our limited way. And when we look at him, we can see some aspect of him, which is a small portion of him, but not the fullness. But when you look at him and understand better, the fullness of him will be revealed through Mashiach. But your understanding needs to be broadened. You need to be stretched. Your brain needs to be expanded. You need to learn different terms and things so you can relate to them and understand more things. So as we go through the Torah portions, we get another little pebble, another little stepping stone, another little thing, so you can understand more of these four letters. But he tried to explain a small portion of the great God that he is. And the basic concept is, I exist. I exist above time. Because he expressed Mashiach within the concept of time in a lower, fuller realm. So we can understand it. But he exists above that. And where the true self of him is the furthest way removed from the first thought of man, he exists above the concept of Vav, or any letter or any word that can exist to try and explain him, because he just is. It's not enough words to explain him. So the gematria of Haya is 20. When you remove the Vav, that's 6, that made 26. That connect also to the Aleph, the cube, the Holy of Holies, the city of Jerusalem, the house, all those things interconnect. The number 20 means to spin, which is the idea of cycles, destruction and calamity, brotherhood, happen, desert, lofty, illness, faint of heart, my humblings, fall out. Then you get seer or insight, prophecy, to be, to exist, to become, to come to pass, timely, to perceive, lovely, to look, to see, to appear, his beloved, who is Mashiach. So we need to go through calamity and pain and destruction, all of those things, to appreciate the beloved. You need to go through a desert experience to appreciate the beloved. You need to have your eyes open and have a revelation and insight in order to appreciate the beloved. We need all the experiences of all this life, good or bad, to appreciate the beloved. That's why everything that we eat and everything we experience are little building blocks to appreciate his beloved. And his beloved is a small portion of who he really is. It's a little window we look into through our limited eyes into the spiritual realm, through the image of the man Mashiach, who is the image of us, so we can relate to him. Does he have 2 arms, legs, and all that? Mashiach does, because he's the image. But the Father, I think, is greater than that. He cannot be described by a head and arms and legs and all that. He's greater than that. He existed prior to the idea of a man and what man ever could look like. All right. When we look at Vav, we look at the meaning of Vav, which is Vavav. It's the word Vav, that means peg, hook, nail, and pin. Now these things you need to construct something. So the idea to capture Yahweh in the physical, so we can interact with him, you need to construct something to protect us from his holiness. And then he constructed these 3 chambers, which we call the tabernacle, which are the 3 beds, which is the word Bekor, or the concept of the firstborn, which is the expression of the covenant within the context of a household. And we are part of the construction process. When Israel constructed the tabernacle, they had to give something from themselves in order to build something that will house the presence of Yahweh within their midst. It will cost you something to experience Yahweh. You need to give something of yourself. The basic form of the idea of giving is the word charity, which is the basis of the word love. So Yahweh just wants your mechanical love, the first step, in providing something of yourself, and will use that little bit of whatever you give him to construct something to reveal himself to you. Now, if you give a little bit of your time, might be money, might be this, might be that, he can use that little bit and reveal something to you in return, something of himself. That's why it's good to provide or to give or whatever you can for the benefit of Yahweh's kingdom. And that's why the prosperity doctrines, all that, it's all about me, give me, give me, give me. And the flow of charity is only from Yahweh's side, never from your side. But the key is, if it flows from your side, you'll get him, a revelation from him. But you need to give something. That's also the principle of half shekel. It's to do with the tabernacle. The silver points at the bottom of the pegs, the vavs, that uphold the structure, that give it the tension it needs, the opposing forces. We're always in some sort of a conflict with our brothers, sisters, whatever, opinions, whatever. Doesn't matter. It provides the strength in the structure, that healthy conversation and differences, because no one of us knows everything. You've got a limited understanding, and you cannot say that your small understanding is more right than the other person's small understanding. They are all just small understandings, and with your little disputes and conflicts and whatever, you have 40,000 different ways to pull the structure, give it its strength. It's okay to have differences. Don't split hairs because we don't know. We will know one day. Until then, just pull the structure in a healthy way. Where the word vav is first used in Exodus 26:32, where he says, "And you shall hang it," that's the veil, "upon the pillars of shittim wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks," which is the word vav, "shall be of gold upon the 4 sockets of silver." Now these hooks are the things that are used to hang the veil from. Now, what do you think these vavs represent? They are men. They're made of gold. They're the veil between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. They're the covering. Who do you think they are? They're the firstborn, the ones with the highest responsibility within the household of Yahweh. They are the anointed ones that's got the highest responsibility and accountability to facilitate the work of Yahweh. Then you get the other vavs, which are the pegs, the 10 pegs that hold the outer court up. Who are they? They're the congregation. They uphold the structure that forms the boundary between people in the world and people of Yahweh. And that's the gateway for the nations to come in. And you provide the safe space for people to be directed into and have access to the priesthood, and then access to the presence of Yahweh. But there are ones that facilitate from the inside into the holy place, and then you have normal people on the outside who are just creating the environment and the family setup for new babies coming in. Just create that friendly household environment for them. Not everyone is called to have the highest calling. There was only one Jacob and one Esau. Each had his tough to carry, each yoke. So don't desire the gifts of someone else who's got a higher gift than you, because with greater gift comes a greater responsibility. He said, don't let anyone desire to be a teacher or this or that, because you'll get a greater judgment. If you don't use it carefully and you use it wrong and bring people to a fall, you will have greater judgment that will come upon you. And everyone's gift is equally important, but some have greater responsibility with a greater consequence if they don't do it right. But everyone's got a role to play to uphold this whole structure, whether you're a peg or a hook. All right, all in context of our household. And that's all, folks. Any comments or questions? So the most important idea that we need to understand is the connection between the covenant, the household, and the birthright. And if you put them together, it's a benefit for the nations. And they need to be carried out. It needs to be protected. It needs to be taught. It needs to be purified and maintained in a way that Yahweh gave it to us. We need to look after it. So that's why we don't add to his word. We don't take away from his word. We take his word serious. We tremble at his word. And we teach that pure word to the new ones coming into the household. And that word and the commandments are the access to the covenant and the blessings of the covenant, which we saw those 4 things. The dew, the new wine, the grain, or the fatness, all that. That's your physical provision and blessing of the covenant. And then you have the spiritual benefit. You'll be blessed if you bless others within the family. But you'll be cursed if you curse those. And Yahweh will look after you. Whether you're part of the firstborn, having a higher responsibility, or whether you're part of the family, we just enjoy the benefits of being part of the household. So that's the main idea or concept for today in this teaching. All right. Who wants to close in prayer?
Father, there is so much in your word that we can grasp, and so much that we are struggling to grasp. I know for me there's a sense of inner knowing that precedes the outer knowing, that somehow being exposed to all of this, Lord, brings us to a place of conscious understanding. But we want to make sure that in this world of absolute confusion, of lies and deceit, manipulation and coercion, Lord God, that we continue to walk a straight path, or if we're walking a crooked path, we're brought into line. And Father, we understand the serious nature of what you've called us to, and how we struggle, each one of us, with those inner elements of our nature that are walking contrary to you. And we ask you in the name of Yeshua that you would strengthen us, Lord, in soul and in our physical strength, Lord God, in our emotional strength, and to be able to walk a walk that is fitting for our relationship with you. We ask you for this in the name of Yeshua, your Son, our Lord, our Saviour.
Amen.